Hey, I'm Sarah Matthews. I'm 28. And up until a few weeks ago, I truly believed I had the kind of family people dreamed about. But then I overheard something that completely broke me. It was just another regular night. We were having dinner, my mom Caroline and my dad Robert, casually talking like nothing was off. And then I heard her say it. The biggest mistake we Manchios ever made. She was talking about me. Dad didn't argue. He just nodded. That one sentence shattered everything I thought I knew. 28 years of memories, of believing I was loved, just gone. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even say anything. I just quietly packed a bag and walked out of that house. No goodbyes. No explanations. What I didn't realize. I left something behind. Something I hadn't opened in years, but it ended up saying everything I never had the courage to. My childhood diary. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if this story hits home for you, if you've ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew about your family came crashing down, go ahead and like this video and subscribe. You're not alone. Let me take you back for a second. I grew up in this picture-perfect colonial house just outside Boston. People used to say we were the ideal family. My mom Caroline is 54 now, one of the top thoracic surgeons in Boston. My dad, Robert, 56, handled investments for clients you've probably seen in Forbes. From the outside, we had it all. Money, status, respect, and the yearly holiday cards with us in matching outfits, smiling like nothing could ever go wrong. But inside that frame was a very different reality. I was their only child. And early on I learned one thing. In our house, love wasn't freely given. You had to earn it. I still remember being in second grade. I brought home a perfect score on a spelling test. My mom looked at me with something close to pride for the very first time. "That's what we expect from a Matthews," she said. She touched my shoulder just for a second, and then went right back to reading her medical journals. That moment, it became my entire blueprint for how to be loved. From that day on, I became her version of perfect. Straight A student. Piano practice until my fingers ached. Every academic club, every award, every deadline met with weeks to spare. By 16, I was valedictorian, captain of the debate team, and already accepted to Northwestern on a full scholarship. On paper, I was everything a parent could be proud of. But behind closed doors, I was just a girl begging to be seen. You know that feeling when you achieve something big, but instead of feeling proud, it just feels empty? Like you're dropping coins into a parking meter, just buying a few extra minutes of someone's attention. That was me over and over again. The pattern never really changed. I'd bring home a win, an A on a test, a ribbon from a recital, and for a split second, I'd get a smile, but then came the comment. 98%? So what happened to the other two? My dad would say, eyes still glued to his paperwork. Writing became my escape early on. I was 7 when my grandmother handed me a little leather journal with a brass lock. "For thoughts too special to say out loud," she whispered. That night, I wrote my first ever entry. "Today, Mommy and Daddy couldn't come to my recital. Mrs. Porter took me. I played really well, but it felt wrong without them." That journal became my best friend. The one I could talk to when the house felt quiet, even though everyone was home. It held stories of piano recitals where I bowed to rows of empty chairs, saved with hopeful little programs, science fairs where I explained my project to someone else's mom because mine were off handling important things. And birthdays? Sometimes celebrated a week late because there was always a meeting, a conference, an emergency. As I got older, I started telling myself it was okay. That they were doing important work, healing people, managing money, making a difference. I convinced myself that needing them made me selfish. That they were actually teaching me to be strong, independent. And I believed it, or tried to. My journals grew with me. By high school, I had an entire color-coded system. Every entry dated, every page filed by theme. It was more than just writing, it was evidence. A quiet record of a childhood I was trying so hard to understand. There were good moments, though. Like one Christmas, my dad sat down and showed me how compounding interest worked, and for once he looked truly proud of how fast I picked it up. Or the rare Sunday mornings when Mom would let me assist her in the kitchen, stitching up oranges with surgical tools, complimenting my steady hands. I held on to those memories tightly, stretching them like gold leaf, thin, delicate, but enough to coat the rest. There were always these little moments, brief flashes where it felt like my parents were actually there with me, emotionally present. But they never lasted long. It was like the second they got too close they had to pull back. Like vulnerability made them uncomfortable, and they needed space to reset, to go back behind that emotional wall. I learned, without even realizing it, how to read the tiniest signals. The slight pinch around my mom's eyes when I disrupted her schedule. My dad's soft, almost inaudible sigh when family things clashed with his work. I noticed everything. I wrote it all down in my journals, trying to make sense of it the only way I knew how. As a kid, I didn't see it as rejection, I saw it as a challenge. If I could just do more, be more, maybe then they'd give me more of their time, their love, their pride. So I pushed myself. I graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern. Moved to Chicago, not too far from home, but far enough to breathe. I told myself those monthly visits back would bring us closer, like the distance had maybe softened something. Each time I'd hope, maybe this visit will be different. Chicago became more than just a city. It became mine. A place where I could be recognized for who I was, not measured against some impossible standard. I joined a boutique digital marketing agency and started making waves pretty quickly. I created bold, new social strategies that pulled in some big national brands. By 26, I was leading my own team and even won Digital Marketer of the Year from the Midwest Marketing Association. But even with all those wins, I was still carrying this weight. Invisible but heavy. Before every video call with my parents, my stomach would tie itself in knots. I'd get tension headaches. I'd rehearse what to say, trying to find that sweet spot between sounding impressive enough to get their praise, but not so proud that I seemed like I was showing off. And then I met Michael. It was at a marketing conference about 2 years ago. We were both speakers. And right away he picked up on things no one else ever noticed. Like how my shoulders would tense up when my phone lit up with my parents' names. Or how my voice changed when I talked to them, higher, more polished, like I had to prove something even in the tone I used. You turn into someone else when you talk to them, Michael said quietly, after sitting through one of those awkward birthday calls with my parents. They gave me maybe 3 minutes of polite happy birthday energy before my dad veered off into a blow-by-blow of his latest golf win. Michael's gentle comments always hit different. Not harsh. Just honest. And they made me notice things I'd been too used to question, like how I always shrunk myself when talking about something I was proud of. I'd downplay my own wins or make sure they didn't seem too much, especially if they didn't fit into the version of success they respected. Your parents should be lifting you up, not making you feel smaller, he said one weekend in Boston, after I brushed off a major promotion like it was no big deal. His words made me pause and squirm, because deep down, I'd built this whole story around my parents being loving in their own tough love way. I defended them without thinking. They just want me to do better, they push me because they care. Michael never argued. He didn't have to. His quiet stares whenever I justified their coldness, that was enough. They were like little mirrors, and I wasn't ready to look at my reflection just yet. Then came last spring. I'd landed a major promotion, executive creative director, and won a pretty big innovation award. Both in the same month. I was proud. Nervous to share, but proud. My mom's response? A quick, "That's nice, dear," followed by a 20-minute speech about budget cuts in her department. My dad? A text. "Congrats. Hope they're paying you right." That was it. No dinner. No call to the extended family. Not even a "we're proud of you." Just the bare minimum, like they were checking a box. Later that night, I ended up with a splitting migraine so bad, Michael had to drive me to the ER. When the doctor asked about stress, I laughed, then I cried. How do you explain that the weight on your chest isn't from failure but from success that no one around you seems to care about? 2 weeks ago, I decided to use my vacation to visit home. I told myself it was to help them plan their 30th anniversary. But really? I think I was still chasing something I've always longed for, a closer bond. A warmer version of family that I hoped might finally show up. I guess part of me believed that if we just had 2 uninterrupted weeks together, no distractions, no obligations, maybe something would finally shift between us. Maybe we'd drop the walls we'd all gotten so good at hiding behind. I came ready. I brought an expensive anniversary gift, a weekend getaway to the same luxury resort where they'd honeymooned. I even had professional photos taken for their living room wall. And honestly, I showed up carrying way too much hope, thinking maybe this time would be different. And for a moment it felt like it was. The first couple of days actually went okay. My mom complimented my outfit, although she did say, "That dress is lovely, but maybe try different shoes? They'd be more flattering on your figure." And my dad struck up a conversation about market trends, not so much to hear my thoughts, but more to confirm that his own were right. Still, I took it all as progress. Small steps. Maybe we were finally building the kind of adult relationship I'd always dreamed of, one where I didn't feel like I had to earn their approval just to exist. On the third night, I went all out. I cooked them a special dinner to celebrate their careers, custom menus, little notes about their milestones, everything. I made my mom's favorite cocoa dish and my dad's go-to chocolate soul. I even pulled out their fancy china, the kind they only used when real guests came over. Everything about that night was meant to say, "I love you. I see you. I'm proud to be your daughter." But nothing could have prepared me for what I overheard just minutes later, the words that would shatter something inside me forever. I was walking in with dessert when I heard my name, so I paused just for a second, right there in the hallway. "Sarah's done well enough, I suppose," my mom said. Her voice was cold, detached, like she was reviewing someone's resume, not talking about her own child. But when I think about everything we gave up for all the things we sacrificed, I just don't know if it was worth it. I stood frozen, hands shaking, dessert plates trembling. "Remember that research role in Switzerland you turned down when she was in middle school?" my dad said, swirling his wine like he was talking about a missed stock pick. "That could have changed everything for your career." My mom sighed, that deep, disappointed kind of sigh. "And your promotion got delayed at least 5 years because we didn't move when she started high school. We held ourselves back for her. Sometimes I wonder who we could have become if we hadn't." I didn't know what to do. I pressed myself against the hallway wall, like maybe I could disappear, become invisible in a home that suddenly didn't feel like mine at all. You know what still stings? That Maldives trip we canceled for my college graduation. I brushed it off back then, told myself it wasn't a big deal. But sometimes it creeps back in, especially when I remember Thomas calling it the best diving experience of his life. And then there was that one dinner I'll never forget, my mom turning to me, glass of wine in hand, her voice soft but sharp, like she was just making conversation. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "what our lives would have been like if we'd waited to have kids? Or not had them at all?" The room went so quiet it felt like time just paused. And then my dad, ever the economist, casually added, "Every time I see Richard and Catherine, 2 vacation homes in Europe, total freedom, and she's still publishing research at 62. My mom let out this carefree little laugh. Not bitter, not sad, just free. "Instead, we have a daughter with a decent marketing job in Chicago," she said, still smiling, "living in that shoebox apartment with a boyfriend who wears jeans to dinner." And then my dad, he actually said this, leaned back and went, "A disappointing return on a 28-year investment." They both laughed, like it was an inside joke, like I wasn't their daughter, just a failed stock. I was standing right there in the hallway, and in that moment something inside me cracked, like I could physically feel my world folding in on itself. The desserts I'd spent hours making, the ones I brought hoping they'd be proud, felt ridiculous. Like I was a kid again, trying to earn gold stars from parents who were always quietly doing the math in the background, measured love, measured pride. I don't even remember setting the desserts down. My body just moved. I guess I made it upstairs somehow without them noticing. I ended up in my childhood bedroom, this perfectly preserved little museum of who I used to be. Trophies still dusted, certificates in frames, shelves of books that had my name tucked in the acknowledgments. And I realized something that made my stomach twist. These weren't mementos of love. They were receipts, justifications, proof they hadn't made a complete mistake. All those piano recitals they attended, they weren't proud moments. They were PR maintenance, a way to keep up the appearance of being involved parents. Every accomplishment I worked so hard for, it wasn't celebrated, it was weighed against what they'd given up. Their time, their travel, their dreams. I sat there on that bed, frozen, and the words kept looping through my head. Wasn't worth it. Disappointing return. Constraints. Sacrifices. But what hurt the most wasn't just what they said. It was how they said it. Like it wasn't the first time they'd had that conversation. I don't think they ever imagined I'd hear them say it, that raw, unfiltered truth. And when I did, I didn't cry. Watching someone else's life fall apart from a distance. I just sat there, frozen. Then I heard them calling for me, not with concern, not even with curiosity, but with that same old irritation, like I was messing up their routine. "Sarah, where's dessert?" My mom's voice had that familiar edge, the kind I'd spent my whole life trying to soften. "Did the soufflés fall? I told you to check the oven temp." I moved like a robot, said I wasn't feeling well, apologized for not finishing dinner. Then I went to my room, shut the door and locked it behind me. No one came to check on me, not even a knock. Instead, I heard the clinking of dishes, the usual chatter about some Tokyo conference call my dad had later that night. They just kept going, as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just shattered my entire understanding of who I was to them. Sleep didn't come that night. Instead, I lay there wide awake, watching old memories fall apart and rebuild themselves into something new and painful. Around 3 a.m., I got up and pulled out a few old shoeboxes from the back of my closet, the ones with my childhood diaries. I'd left them there when I moved out. My parents never touched them, probably figured they were just typical teen ramblings. But those pages, they told the whole story, and I finally saw it. Every entry from age 7 all the way through college was written by a little girl trying to earn love that should have been freely given, trying to become easy to love, trying to matter. One entry read, "Dad missed my science fair again." Mrs. Wilson asked where my parents were. I said they were saving lives and managing important money. She looked sad and patted my head. Age 8. Another said, "Mom said my piano playing is improving but still needs more precision. I practice 4 hours today until my fingers hurt. Tomorrow I'll do 5. Age 10. And then this one. "Got perfect scores on all my finals." Dad barely looked up. He asked if maybe the tests were just easy for everyone. "I'll take harder classes next semester." Age 15. Reading it all at once, the pattern became so clear and so heartbreaking. They didn't see me. Not really. And somewhere along the way I stopped expecting them to. I internalized every small moment of praise as something to earn, not something I deserved. My diary didn't sound like pain. It sounded like determination. A quiet, heartbreaking promise to try harder, to finally be enough. By the time the sun came up, I just knew I couldn't stay in that house for one more hour. At exactly 6:30, my parents came downstairs, dressed sharp like they always are, ready to conquer their workday. And they acted like nothing ever happened. Not a single word about what I'd overheard. Not a glance that hinted at guilt. My mom looked at me and casually said, "You look pale, drink more water." My dad? He was busy asking if I'd seen his favorite tie. That's it. No mention of the anniversary dinner I left unfinished. No questions about where I'd gone or why I'd disappeared mid-meal. Just business as usual. They moved around me the way they always had, like I was there but never fully seen. "We'll be late tonight," my mom said, flipping through her calendar. "Board meeting at the hospital. Don't wait up." My dad barely looked up from his phone. "Client dinners this week. There's that pasta you like in the freezer," he added. And then they left. The front door clicked shut, same as it had a million times before, sealing me back into that quiet, hollow house. But something had shifted. I wasn't numb anymore. I felt clear, painfully clear. So I started packing. Only the essentials. Few clothes. My laptop. And the most important thing, my journals. All of them. I found them tucked away in drawers under my bed behind old books. 42 journals in total, each one a piece of me. My thoughts. My feelings. My silent screams. A whole life of trying to earn their approval. A whole life of not being enough. I walked through every room one last time, seeing everything differently now. The living room where I used to practice piano for hours, hoping they'd say, "You're amazing," but they never did. The dining room where my biggest wins were always followed by, "But have you thought about doing better?" The study, God, that room where my dad once told me after I broke my arm, "Matthew's women don't cry." I was 12. I didn't take any photos. No family mementos. Nothing that tried to rewrite the truth. Just my journals, my truth, bound in ink and paper. In the kitchen, I grabbed a pen and scribbled a short note. I heard everything. "I'm leaving. I need space. Please don't contact me." I thought about saying more. 28 years of unsaid words were practically begging to spill out. But what would have been the point? They said what they meant. They showed me who they are. No extra paragraph was going to change that. The drive back to Chicago should have taken 19 hours. But it felt endless. I kept stopping, unable to keep my mind from spiraling. Waves of grief hit me like sucker punches out of nowhere, no warning. Somewhere in Ohio, at a random rest stop, I completely broke down. I mean, full body sobbing. So hard. A stranger came up and asked if I needed medical help. All I could say through the tears was, "Family emergency." And it was. The inadequacy of those words nearly triggering another breakdown. By the time I reached my apartment 2 days later, Michael had left 17 increasingly worried messages. He took one look at my face and canceled his meetings for the week, creating a protective space where I could begin processing what had happened. "Turn off your phone," he suggested after it buzzed for the 5th time with my mother's number. "Give yourself permission to put yourself first." It seemed like a revolutionary concept after 28 years of arranging my existence around my parents' expectations. The first 3 days passed in a fog of sleep, tears, and Michael's patient presence. He asked no questions, simply provided food, comfort, and the profound gift of caring without conditions. When I finally told him what I'd overheard, his face darkened with anger, but he expressed no surprise. "I've seen how they treat you," he said. Quietly, I just didn't know how deep it when I called my office and requested emergency personal leave, something I'd never done despite years of overwork and accumulated vacation time. My boss, instead of expressing the disappointment I irrationally feared, responded with immediate concern and approval. "For a to absence, take whatever time you need, Sarah. Your projects will wait." This simple act of human kindness from someone with no biological obligation to care about my well-being broke something open inside me. I turned off my phone, disconnected from email, and for the first time in my life prioritized my own healing over external expectations. My parents' messages began professionally concerned and quickly devolved into something more revealing. "Day 1, Sarah. Your note is concerning. Please call to discuss what you think you heard." Day 2. This behavior is unprofessional and immature. Your clients deserve better. Day 3. We've called your office. They say you've taken leave. This is extremely disappointing. Each message exposed priorities that had nothing to do with my well-being, their confusion, their judgment, their disappointment. Not once did they ask, "Are you okay?" or say, "We love you." On day 4, Michael convinced me to see his therapist, Dr. Ella Chin, who fit me in for an emergency session. "What you're describing," she said after I recounted my childhood and the overheard conversation, contains classic patterns of emotional neglect. It's particularly insidious because nothing overtly abusive happened. They provided materially while withholding emotionally, making it nearly impossible for you to identify what was missing. This validation from a professional cracked the foundation of self-doubt I'd built my life upon. I wasn't oversensitive or demanding too much. I was recognizing a lifetime of legitimate emotional deprivation. Dr. Chan suggested we explore my diaries together, providing therapeutic context for patterns I'd recorded but never truly understood. The earliest journals revealed a child's progressive internalization of conditional love. Entry after entry documented achievements pursued not from passion but from desperate hope for connection. Got 100% on spelling and vocabulary tests. Made mom and dad cards saying how much I love them. Dad said, "Cards waste paper." Mom put hers in the drawer without reading it. Age 9. 1. First chair violin today. Called home to tell them. Housekeeper answered and said they're in Aspen this weekend. They forgot to tell me they were going away. Age 12. Full scholarship to Northwestern. Called mom at hospital. She said, "That's nice, sweetie." And had to go. Dad texted, "Good investment paying off. Why doesn't this feel like enough?" Age 17. Dr. Chun helped me recognize how this constant emotional scarcity had shaped my adult relationships and career choices. My perfectionism, workaholism, and tendency to overfunction in relationships weren't personality traits but adaptive survival mechanisms developed in an environment where love was tied to performance. Michael maintained strict boundaries with my parents during this period, screening calls and protecting my space for healing. When they showed up unannounced at our apartment building a week after I left, he met them in the lobby, refusing to let them upstairs. "Sarah will contact you when she's ready," he told them, standing firm despite my father's threats about unauthorized absence from family obligations and my mother's clinical assessment that I was having some sort of breakdown. Their inability to respect This basic boundary further illuminated the dynamic I was working to understand. The most unexpected support came from my workplace. My creative team sent daily encouragement without demanding explanations. My assistant rerouted clients and handled emergencies without complaint. My boss called once to say simply, "Take all the time you need, your job is secure." These acts of unconditional support from people with no obligation to provide it highlighted everything missing from my family relationships. In my third therapy session, Chun suggested I begin writing about my experience, not just for personal processing but potentially to help others. Emotional neglect is rarely discussed because its victims often can't name what happened to them. Your journals provide a unique documentation of this experience. This suggestion resonated deeply. I began organizing my journals chronologically, typing key entries into a document that quickly grew to over 50 pages. Patterns emerged with painful clarity. My parents consistently prioritized appearance over authenticity, achievement over connection, and social standing over emotional support. The writing became both excavation and reconstruction, allowing me to acknowledge painful truths while building a new narrative based on self-worth rather than external validation. I titled the document "Invisible Child Growing Up Emotionally Unseen in a Materially Privileged Home" and shared it with Dr. Chun and Michael. The first time I'd ever voluntarily exposed my private writings, their responses affirmed what my parents had never managed to convey: that my experiences mattered, that my feelings were valid, and that my story had inherent worth beyond what it achieved or produced. By the end of the second week, I had developed enough emotional stability to check messages more regularly. What I found was revealing: 37 texts and 16 voicemails from my parents that never once included the words, "I'm sorry," or "we love you." Instead, they focused entirely on my behavior, my overreaction, my unprofessional disappearance, my misunderstanding of a private conversation. The language centered on disruption to their lives rather than concern for my well-being, confirming everything my journaling had revealed about our fundamental dynamic. What I didn't anticipate was how their approach would escalate when these attempts at control failed to produce the desired response. In the third week of my absence, my parents filed a missing person report with the Chicago police despite knowing exactly where I was. Two officers conducted a wellness check at my apartment, seeming embarrassed by the obvious misuse of police resources. When they found me clearly safe and stable, "Your parents seem pretty concerned," one officer mentioned while completing paperwork confirming my voluntary absence. "They're concerned about appearances," I corrected, "not about me." The officer's knowing glance suggested this wasn't his first encounter with family dynamics disguised as concern. This forced intervention left me with little choice but to establish direct contact. I agreed to a video call with clear parameters: 20 minutes with Michael present, focused solely on acknowledging my need for space rather than debating what I'd heard. My parents appeared on screen looking uncharacteristically disheveled. My mother without makeup, my father's shirt wrinkled, their composed facets had slipped, revealing not concern but indignation. This behavior is completely unacceptable. My mother began without greeting, "Do you have any idea what this has done to our reputation?" The hospital administrator asked if you were having a mental health crisis. My father nodded vigorously. "We've had to make excuses to everyone. The Richardsons' anniversary party is this weekend and now we have to explain your absence." Neither mentioned my welfare or expressed relief at seeing me safe. Their priorities remained unchanged: social standing, professional reputation, appearances. "I heard everything you said at dinner," I stated calmly, Michael's supportive hand on my shoulder about regretting having me about the disappointing return on your 28-year investment. My mother's face registered shock before quickly rearranging into dismissal. "You completely misinterpreted a private conversation. We were simply discussing career paths hypothetically." My father adopted his client management tone. "Everyone occasionally wonders about roads not taken, Sarah. That doesn't mean we regret our choices." Their synchronized denial, so practiced and smooth, might have worked in the past when I desperately wanted to believe them, but therapy and distance had strengthened my perception. "I've kept journals since I was 7 years old," I told them. "They document a consistent pattern exactly matching what I heard you say. This wasn't a one-time comment, it was the explicit articulation of how you've always treated me." Disbelief crossed their faces, followed by the familiar expression of calculated response formation I'd seen throughout my life before they could construct another denial. I shared my screen and showed them scan pages from 3 decades of diaries, each entry time-stamped and contextual. Age 8, Mom looked at my artwork and asked why the perspective was wrong. I practiced drawing 6 more hours, but she didn't look again. Age 13, Dad missed my debate championship. His assistant brought a card that said, "Good job," in her handwriting. Age 22, first job promotion. Mom asked if there were better companies I could have applied to. Instead, I scrolled through dozens of entries documenting a lifetime of emotional neglect, watching their faces move from dismissal to defense to uncomfortable recognition. When I finished, my mother attempted redirection. Every parent makes mistakes, Sarah. This dramatic exit and these ancient grievances are hardly productive. My father nodded. We gave you every advantage. Most children would be grateful rather than keeping score of perceived slights. Their responses confirmed everything the diaries had documented. Invalidation, deflection, blame, reversal. I'm sending you digital copies of selected entries, I told them, ending the call as my father began another justification. Read them, and if you want to have an honest conversation about our relationship, let me know. 3 days pass without contact. I returned to work, finding unexpected strength and routine and the genuine connections I'd built with colleagues. On the 4th day, an email arrived from my father with the subject line, "We found your diary." The message was brief, uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Sarah, you left one of your childhood diaries in the downstairs bookshelf. We found it while looking for albums to show the Hendersons. I've read it. Your mother doesn't know I'm emailing you. I need to speak with you, not to defend or explain, just to talk when you're ready." The diary he referenced was one I'd kept at age 10, particularly detailed about my efforts to win their approval and my confusion at their consistent emotional distance. That he'd read it without my mother's knowledge suggested a crack in their unified front, a potential opening for authentic communication. 2 days later, my mother called, her voice lacking its usual controlled precision. "I found your father reading your old diary," she said. No greeting or preamble. "He was crying, Sarah. I've never seen him cry, not even when his father died." She paused and I heard a shaky breath. "Then I read it too. Is that really how you felt all this time?" For the first time in my memory, my mother's voice held genuine emotion, rather than calculated effect. "Yes," I answered simply. Every day the silence that followed was filled with 28 years of unspoken truth. When she spoke again, her voice was almost unrecognizable. "I don't know how to fix this." Another first, my mother acknowledging something beyond her immediate ability to control. "I don't know if it can be fixed," I responded honestly, but understanding what happened would be a start. The conversation that followed was halting, uncomfortable, but marked by something unprecedented. My mother listening without interrupting, acknowledging emotions without dismissing them as inefficient or irrational. She didn't defend or justify, just absorbed what I was saying with growing comprehension of the damage that had been done. When we hung up an hour later, nothing was resolved, but something had shifted. The perfectly maintained wall between us had developed its first significant crack, allowing a thin ray of authentic connection to penetrate decades of emotional distance. Dr. Chan suggested family therapy as the next step if my parents were genuinely interested in repairing our relationship. To my surprise, they agreed, though not without resistance. Our first session via video conference was awkward and tense, with my father initially treating it like a business negotiation, and my mother approaching it as a medical consultation. The therapist gently redirected them, establishing that this wasn't about assigning blame but understanding patterns to create healthier dynamics. By the 3rd session, we'd identified a generational pattern of emotional neglect. My father reluctantly shared stories of his own childhood with emotionally distant parents who prioritized achievement and social standing above affection. My father never once told me he was proud of me, he admitted, his voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. The closest he came was nodding when I announced my acceptance to Harvard Business School. My mother revealed similar experiences with her surgeon father, and socially ambitious mother. Emotions were considered weaknesses in our house, she explained. My mother's highest praise was adequate performance. After piano recital for the first time, I saw my parents not as the powerful architects of my emotional deprivation but as earlier victims of the same damaging patterns they had unconsciously perpetuated this understanding didn't excuse their behavior but provided crucial context for how intergenerational trauma operates even in materially privileged environments. Dr. Chan helped us establish a framework for careful limited contact, while I continued my individual healing journey. I maintained physical distance, declining invitations to visit Boston, while engaging in structured weekly video conversations focused on specific topics rather than general pleasantries. The most significant change was my freedom from seeking their approval. I no longer filtered my experiences to highlight achievements or minimize emotions. Spoke honestly about my feelings, my relationship with Michael, my creative writing process, and my growing understanding of emotional health. Sometimes my honesty was met with uncomfortable silence or awkward attempts at connection from parents with limited emotional vocabulary, but these authentic interactions, however imperfect, held more value than decades of performance-based communication. During this period of limited contact, I began writing more extensively about emotional neglect, publishing anonymous articles in psychology magazines and online mental health forums. The response was overwhelming, hundreds of comments from people recognizing their own experiences. In my words, many for the first time. With Dr. Chen's encouragement, I started a support group for adult children of emotionally unavailable parents, creating a safe space where participants could name and process experiences often dismissed as not that bad compared to more overt forms of abuse. This work became increasingly meaningful, providing purpose to my painful experiences and helping others recognize patterns they had normalized throughout their lives. One article caught the attention of a national parenting magazine, leading to a feature story on emotional neglect in achievement-oriented families. Though published under a pseudonym, the article gained significant attention, including ironically from my mother, who mentioned reading a fascinating piece on emotional neglect without realizing its author was her daughter. 6 months after leaving Boston, I agreed to meet my parents in person at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant halfway between Chicago and Boston. The encounter was awkward but marked by tentative authenticity from all sides. My father, always perfectly tailored and composed, arrived with his tie slightly askew and mentioned having trouble sleeping before the meeting. My mother, normally critical of my appearance, simply hugged me and said, "It's good to see you," without commentary on my hair, clothes, or weight. We talked for 4 hours, navigating uncomfortable silences and occasional defensive reactions, but maintaining connection through difficult emotions. When my father said, "We never meant to hurt you," I responded with newly established boundaries. "Impact matters more than intention. I needed you to see me, not just my achievements." Rather than dismissing this perspective, he nodded slowly and replied, "I'm trying to understand that now." My mother added softly, "We don't know how to do this differently yet, but we want to learn." That yet contained more acknowledgement of needed change than I'd heard in 28 years. As I completed the manuscript of my memoir, now titled The Perfect Daughter, Reclaiming Self-Worth After Emotional Neglect, I recognized that my journey wasn't about achieving a perfect resolution with my parents, but about finding peace within myself. Our relationship remains a work in progress, 3 people learning a new emotional language. After decades of miscommunication, there are still difficult moments, relapses into old patterns, and days when the damage seems too extensive to repair, but there are also new experiences. My father asking about my feelings rather than my accomplishments, my mother acknowledging when she slips into criticism rather than connection, both of them learning imperfectly but genuinely to relate to me as a person rather than a reflection of themselves. The most profound lesson I've learned is that forgiveness isn't a single moment, but an ongoing process requiring conscious choice and consistent effort from all involved. It doesn't erase the past but creates space for a different future. Healing from emotional neglect doesn't happen in dramatic revelations but in small, consistent moments of being truly seen and valued. My worth was never dependent on their ability to recognize it, though I spent decades believing it was. This journey has taught me that family healing takes time, effort, and willingness from all sides. Sometimes those elements align, allowing for genuine transformation. Other times, boundaries must be maintained to protect hard-won emotional health. The diary they discovered became a bridge between Worlds that had seemed hopelessly disconnected, the inner reality of a child desperate for unconditional love, and the limited emotional capacity of parents who had never received it themselves. Have you ever discovered that something you wrote in the past helped heal a relationship? In the present, share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear they're not alone in their experience of emotional neglect. Remember that your feelings are valid, your experiences matter, and healing is always possible even when the path forward isn't clear. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage on your own journey toward authentic connection.